Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features a book that I've been on the lookout for some time and recently acquired, and that is Adastra in Africa. So this book is very interesting because it presents in deluxe format what Barry Windsor-Smith intended to be the third part of the life-death stories that he co-created with Chris Claremont in Uncanny X-Men 186 and 198. So the story goes, at least from Barry Windsor-Smith's side, that he independently went ahead and drew a third part to that storyline, and it was lettered by Tom Orzechowski, and it went up to Marvel Editorial, who put the kibosh on the project. According to Windsor-Smith, the reason that Marvel Editorial balked at the story is to do with its climax in Act 3, which involves a suicide, quote unquote, and Marvel Editorial felt that the book could be misread as promoting suicide, which Windsor-Smith thought ridiculous. And so he put the work away into his creator's drawer, so to speak, where it languished for 10 years. And then when he was working on the Storyteller, Barry Windsor-Smith Storyteller project with Dark Horse Comics, he got the idea in the late 90s to take the pages out again and reconfigure them so that Storm is repurposed to be, by virtue of as simple an adjustment as the pointy ear here that you can see on the cover, that she becomes Barry Windsor-Smith's young gods character, Adastra. So, looking inside the work itself, those changes are extremely cosmetic. It is absolutely possible to read this story as featuring Storm and as being Windsor-Smith's third and concluding part to a life-death trilogy. So let's open the book up, and hopefully you can see all of this on screen. So inside the dust jacket there is a blurb which promotes the nature of the book. Adastra in Africa is a major, previously unpublished graphic story by Barry Windsor-Smith, the renowned comics storyteller. It features Adastra, the most popular member of the Young Gods serial from BWS's groundbreaking Storyteller series. Created by Windsor-Smith as the third and final installment of the acclaimed life-death issues of Marvel Comics' The Uncanny X-Men, this poignant tale resided in BWS's files for over a decade after editors at Marvel declined to publish the story, which was not written and drawn under their supervision. That's an important little caveat there. It frees BWS up to publish this himself through Fantagraphics, as it turned out, in 1999. I was doing some thinking about this. Who was the Marvel editor-in-chief in 1987 when the original Life-Death third part was slated to have been published? The editor-in-chief, there was two of them. In the first half of the year, it was Jim Shooter, and in the second half, it was Tom DeFalco. Now, of those, I would actually, strangely, be surprised if Jim Shooter put the kibosh on this story, given that he was the one who approved the conclusion to Uncanny X-Men 137, where Jean Grey Phoenix commits suicide and kills herself so as to thwart the Dark Phoenix using her for a destructive purpose in the future. So how would Jim Shooter have a problem with Act 3 of this work? I don't know. So I kind of think actually it could be Tom DeFalco, and infamously DeFalco, at least under his EIC stewardship, Todd McFarlane left the Spider-Man title because of the censorship of a panel where he had Shatterstar of X-Force cutting Juggernaut in the eye, and he drew that out, and then Marvel Editorial balked, and then McFarlane basically left at the end of that issue, which I think was Spider-Man number 16. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So And I really can't see Ann Nocenti, who was the editor of the X-Men comics at the time, having a problem with any of this. Nocenti, one of the most intellectual and liberal of the X-Men creators of the 90s, the 80s and early 90s. So I'd like to hear the other side of the story from Marvel, what their perspective is on why this wasn't accepted for publication. And interesting, when one opens up to the credits here, created and designed by Barry Windsor-Smith, lettering Tom Orzechowski, also June Costar and BWS. And some of that lettering involves the reconfiguration of this away from being a story involving Storm or Aurora of the X-Men, and instead this Adastra character. This is a first edition, April 1999. I don't think this has been reprinted, and my particular copy, I'm very pleased about this, is signed by Barry Windsor-Smith himself. So that's something I'm very happy with. So here is the opening splash page, and this is Storm, simply. There's no pointy ears in this particular drawing. This is Storm, and the story opens with first-person exposition. Storm saying, "Many years have passed, but I have returned. Now I'm fated in a procession of clattering skulls and bones, strung as garlands and taffeta. But these are not the brittle reeds of ancestors. These are the sons, daughters, and heirs of Midge-Nari's village." So this story doesn't really have much to do with Uncanny X-Men 186 and the romance between Forge and Storm. There's no appearance by Forge or no reference to Forge in this, and everything to do with story from 198. So I'll just adjust this for the video camera. So here we have Storm arriving in Midge-Nari's village, and just, you know, it almost goes without saying, but I'm going to say it nonetheless. Absolutely stunning work by Barry Windsor-Smith. A tremendous talent, a master of the comics medium, unbelievable attention to detail. The amount of work that must have gone into this, stunning stuff. And of course, something else to note is there's no color on this work, so it's all black and white. And I'm in two minds about that, because obviously in black and white you get to see the full detail of the line work, like this detail here rendering the hill behind the village, or the detail of the branches of this particular tree here, as well as all the detailing of the costumes of the village folk. So, you know, that really pops in black and white. But I did like Barry Windsor-Smith's own colouring of his work in 198 and 205 of the X-Men. As has been said elsewhere, in particular by Jim Rugg of Cartoonist Kayfabe, Barry Windsor-Smith at that point in the 80s was drawing with colour. He was really pressing and using to the maximum the limited, working within the limits of the 4-colour process of the 1980s, and really doing amazing things with that. So I would like to see how he would handle these pages with that particular palette and style of working in colour. But I mean, just happy to have this nonetheless. So the villagers are delighted at the arrival, and you know what? I'm going to call her Storm for most of this, because that is who this is, and this is the follow-up to 198. And so the village hasn't gotten on very well in the meantime. It turns out later that 6 years have passed since she visited the village to help Shani give birth to her child, and had that encounter with the village shaman Midge-Nari. So there's obviously been drought here and a degree of famine. Now this book coming out in 1999 puts it in the context of the famine in Somalia. And in my video on 198, I was conjecturing about where the village might be. and I felt that it wasn't in Kenya, that it might have been in Ethiopia, because that would have positioned it at the tail end of the Ethiopian famine in 1983 to 85. So I wonder, was part of the reason that BWS wanted to get this into print in 1999 was yet another famine in Africa, this time in Somalia. So I don't know, it's just a pet theory of mine at the moment. So she sees the death and hunger wrought by the famine in the village. This is a stunning image here, with this boy being lifted up by these village elders. And the figure drawing here and the particular positioning of the body reminds me of some medieval and Renaissance art, the deposition of the body of Christ from the cross. And of course, like, BWS is a student of Renaissance art, so it may well be an allusion or a reference. And there's a subtext of sacrifice, self-sacrifice running through this story, and redemption, self-sacrifice and redemption, which of course are major tropes of the Christian story as well. So here we have Storm, after viewing the dire situation in the village, responding to the rain dance and using her powers to bring a rainstorm with a crack of lightning here. And so it rains, but also she destroys the machinery outside the village. So this is a story point from Uncanny X-Men 198, where these giant machines, tractors, and other kinds of industrial tech had been used in the vicinity of the village to farm the land, but had over-farmed the land, and the land had lost its fertility. So she destroys these machines here, and we get the rains falling now as the villagers do their rain dance and chant her name, which of course here is Adastra, but this is Storm. And here comes the rain. And just the technique by Barry Windsor-Smith here, stunning. He's using white media here to go against the black ink, and it just amazing, panel to panel, these vertical panels here. And again, that was a motif of his Life, Death Part 2, 198 issue. You had these vertical panels, so we're getting them here again in this particular work. So as I move along these pages, Storm, Adastra, goes up upon the hill where Mijnari died, because there was a rule in the village when a new baby was born that one of the elders had to make way, because there was a very delicate balance in terms of the village being able to provide for itself. So she visits his cairn atop the hill and says, Mijnari, your time has come again, while the rain is falling. So she uses her powers to blast the cairn, and in a miracle, a tree springs forth in full bloom from Mijnari's resting place. And just again, just stunning illustration here by Windsor-Smith. Just the level of detail is incredible. And the villagers react in shock and surprise at what's happened atop the hill behind the village. And the whole village then, the area around it, starts to bloom and blossom. And the villagers, naturally enough, are delighted with this miracle. So then Storm alights, and with a motion of her hand, the thunder stops, as it is always in her command. And of course, back in the continuity of the X-Men back in 1987, Storm was without her powers, but she did, of course, regain them in the course of the Fall of the Mutants storyline. But here she has her powers. So this is the end of Act 1, and then we get Act 2. So BWS has divided his story into 4 acts. Act 4 is a 2-page epilogue in my book, but there are 3 substantial acts. So the village is once more fertile and verdant, and the drum beats stop. And then 3 village elders come forward, and they praise Storm. They fall before her, but she insists that they do not, that she's not their savior. It is your great soul spirit, Midgenari, who has brought you this wonderment, she insists. And so she begins to take off her jewelry and bangles, and she calls them dismissively or deridingly baubles and tin fetishes and talismans, which this particular village elder is not happy about. So ultimately, shortly, he will come forward. But in the meantime, one of them asks, is she not their goddess? And she responds in the negative. And she says that life is less certain than death. It must be nurtured and tended with careful touch, because without good caution, your miracle will fade and die. And there is a criticism here of the Western world, the industrial Western world, where Adastra Storm says, your culture died only because of your belief in the machines that now rot at your feet, and in the lies of wealth and abundance from those who cannot command faith even on their own foreign soils. Okay. But at this point, one of the elders steps forward, Malawi, and he demurs. And he says, you talk of dignity as what? As farmers? We know nothing as farmers. Where is in that our dignity? And she's sorry then. So this is interesting. BWS doesn't have a simple perspective running through the text. And there is pushback against Storm here in his storyline. And Malawi calls her one of the fateless outlanders, and talks again much about the dignity of the people. And he departs the scene. The others apologize for him. And then we get further dialogue between Storm and the village elders, where Storm learns that Shani is dead, died 2 years previously. And this indeed is her skull that was used as part of the ornamentation of the bier on which they brought her into the village. So she asks to see Shani's boy, whom she played a great role in delivering. And so this village elder brings forward the boy, and he is hungry and emaciated. We really see that in this particular panel here, and here as well. Storm Adastra asks this village elder to take the boy in and raise him as one of his own. And we learn of his loss, his own loss, whereby he's lost his wife and he's lost 2 of his own children. But he says the suffering is past now, and this good green earth is a world of giving, as the boy plucks one of the fruits from one of the trees that has grown and blossomed from Midgenari's miracle. And now we move to Act 3, and Storm once again goes atop the hill outside the village, where Malawi is sitting under the newly blossomed tree. And what she wears here, this garment, is exactly what she was wearing in Uncanny X-Men 198. So very close visual continuity here. And this style very evocative of the style that BWS used to conclude 198. So Malawi is under the tree, and he is sitting there silently, and Storm tries to get through to him to apologize and to get him to come back down into the village. And she talks about how she got information that he had buried his own son today, and that grief has torn bitterly at his heart. But he finally responds and says, "He was not my son, he was my sister's son. Were she alive, she would be sad, but she is dead, and now her son is dead." So there's a lot about death in this particular story. Storm gets an apology from Malawi. I spoke in anger to you, goddess. For that I am sorry. I accused you to be faithless. For that I am sorry twice more. Then you accept the gift of the shaman, she says to him. The gift of the shaman is great indeed, he says falteringly. Malawi, what's wrong requiring a gift in turn? So something has happened here, and we learn over the page that he has cut himself. Now, in the art, I can't find any visual evidence of the cutting. I assume he's cut his wrists here, maybe vertically, but there really isn't any gory depiction of what he's done, but he has cut himself and he's bleeding out. So Storm is shocked and endeavors to lift him and bring him to the village for medical treatment. But then something very strange happens with the appearance of this figure, who turns out to be Mijnari. Not ghost, not flesh, his very presence charges the air like a sudden storm. So he dialogues with Storm and says he can't let her take Malawi away from that place, for then his death would indeed be tragic and meaningless. Mijnari says if she leaves him there, he will live forever. His name will be legend, for Malawi surrenders his life not for one, but for all of his people. So this is about blood sacrifice, and there in the background there is something of the Christian mystery as well, underpinning what's going on here. The tree on the hill too, symbolic of the cross on the hill of Golgotha. There's skulls on this hill, and Golgotha means in Hebrew the place of the skull as well. So BWS playing around with Christian tropes in this story. So Storm loses her strength, and Mijnari takes the body of Malawi and says, "Joy is for him." And here we get to the climax of the story. For he goes to his family and to God. So Mijnari ascends a nimbus path over baying skulls and long-reaching bones, and takes Malawi up into to embrace the dead and the dying, and bow and bind close about them like the fingers of the hand of God, drawing close into the heart of creation. And in one ultimate instant, the dream of heaven on earth is manifest, and I let fall the shadow of my eyes. So this is Storm's inner monologue, and we have this blast of light from this miraculous tree atop the hill. So this is about sacrifice, redemption, beatitude, and some kind of epiphany for Storm at the conclusion of the story. And then we get Act 4, which, as I said earlier, is a kind of 2-page epilogue, where Storm, Adastra, comes to and gives us her understanding of what it was all about. Mijnari spoke to me of death, life and death. He took Malawi. Malawi, he died here. He cut his veins and bled to death. Yet there is no blood, and the bones and skulls are gone, vanished like in a dream. Was it a dream, or did the gates of heaven open last night? Nothing but the tree remains, and it seems ancient and grand in its years, as if it has lived forever, not but one magical day. This, then, is the life for which Malawi sacrificed his own. Not for one, but for all, his people, the shaman said. Yes, I see that now. The sweet warm breeze with fragrance of eucalyptus and fig carries laughter of children up from the village below. And in shifting spangles of sunlight pearls the bone-white orbs that hang like bloodless berries, or perhaps small souls hung like stars in the eternal firmament. So a very purple prose ending to this storyline, but trying to say something about life, death, and the fruits of this tree are indeed these skulls. So a strange synthesis worked at the ending of the story. And that is it. So BWS appends this fictional interview with Adastra, where she comments on the story and her casting as a character in the story, where you learn a little bit about her, but you also learn that she has a kind of a critical perspective on it, where she understands that the role was originally Ororo's, and she says, well, I was wondering, is this Oreo Butch? Ororo? No, I don't think so. Why? Because she talks like she's got a broom up her ass, like maybe her bloomers are a bit bunched up. I think that's the way the X-Men actually talk, but it's so bloody stilted and theatrical. Who the hell talks like that? Sounds like she's addressing the UN or something. Talk about stuck up. You feel that the script should have been changed? Changed? Burned, more like it. I hate all that self-conscious comic booky bullshit. I believe the reasoning was that if the script, says the other speaker, was modified to reflect your own speech, the story would have seemed irreverent. And she responds, well, that's bullshit. I'm not always drunk on my ass, you know. I can be perfectly godlike when I have to be. And then the other voice says, but an underlying motif of the story is the character's naivete about the depth of the tribal beliefs, that they are in the care of the gods. It seems unlikely that you would have handled the situation quite the same way as, and so on and so forth. So there is a kind of like, through this fiction of an interview with Adastra, some side commentary on some of the parts of the story that just were not changeable. And I don't know what you make of that, but for my part, I'm glad that we have the story. And however, BWS rationalized it for himself and escaped Marvel's lawyers. It doesn't really matter to me, so long as we were beneficiaries of his conclusion to the life-death storyline, and beneficiaries of just this stunning art that he produced back in 1987. And here we go, another image. This one I think bespoke for this particular hardcover version, so this a piece of work from '99. And there we go. And the back cover is a zoom in on the image from the front cover. So, I hope you enjoyed this video on Adastra in Africa. If you did, please like the video, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.